G'day, friends and fans. It is grim news out of Germany today. Merkel 2.0, while not declaring war on Russia, has stated that Europe and Russia are no longer at peace. This, of course, comes Trump announcement that Ukraine can win. Well, I think we're all now just that little bit more in danger of left-wing violence. For far too long, the left has engaged in provocation and violence. The world has learnt nothing from the Soviet Union nor the collapse of the Soviet Union. The world has no morality. The war that was declared in 1939 on false pretexts was never declared against China or any African nation who engaged in equal or worse atrocities. And let's not speak of Cambodia. Instead, we have a false morality in this world, ladies and gentlemen. Friends and fans, this is not hyperbole. If anything, I am understating how immoral the world is right now. And I'm not talking about sexual impropriety. That's the bottom of the ladder. The amount of drug use, the amount of government abuse of power, the amount of left-wing violence. Every demonstration is an act of bullying, as far as I'm concerned. They want to voice their disagreement, but they never honour those disagreements. But they never honour any protest against them. They ignore any protest against them, because you're under no obligation to listen to a protester. So they turn violent. They hold society hostage, and increasingly so. You see it with every strike, with every picket line, with every protest. Every time there is violence. And every time the government gives in. And every time people are held hostage at the Bowser when they go to get fuel. Every time they turn on the light, they are robbed. Every time you buy food, every time you buy anything, the state robs you to pay off these NGOs, to pay off terrorists around the world. Africa declared its independence, then immediately floods its excess population to the west. India has its independence, but floods its excess population to the west. Stop the boats. Stop believing naively that the refugee is a refugee, that every asylum seeker is an asylum seeker. But the left, they have no virtue. They use virtue against you so they can bring in their allies, so they can turn everything into communist mush out of their childish notion of fair play, of which there is no such thing. We are not born equal. No society is equal. You do not see people getting into boats or to go to Cuba except when they want to flee justice. The same with Mexico. Most of the people, you don't see people lining up to go to China except when paid off by China. And less said about North Korea, the better. Ukraine How many people heard of Ukraine before 2022 or 2014? Or at all, except maybe now and again during the Cold War. Maybe it came up a few times in history class as some of the sites of the worst atrocities during World War II. And, of course, those who remember their history well know that Ukraine was the source of the Russian Revolution. They had their own atrocities before and after the Russian Revolution. They had atrocities they had mass purges. The world never declared war on them. World has no morality. It has no principles. According to Germany, of course, the Independent, which is far from it, says that Putin is waging a war against the continent's freedom. This is, of course, coming from Chancellor Merkel 2.0, but he insists we're not at war. But he claims that Russia's war is against democracy and our freedom! Democracy! Every liberal democracy degenerates into fascism, folks. It is, look, from the history of Athens and Dracos all the way throughout history. Liberalism is a stepping stone to fascism. Now, they claim to know Russia's intentions. I call bullshit on that each and every time. World leaders must be stood up to every time they say bullshit. But all we hear is from the left is, we must stop Trump, we must stop Putin. Meanwhile, Xi threatens war with Taiwan. Zip. Whenever North Korea threatens war with South Korea, what do we hear from the left? Crickets. Whenever Ukraine murdered hundreds or thousands of ethnic Russians, the left, crickets. The world has no morality. Hungary, time and time again, has tried to be the voice of reason. Time and time again. Ukraine has accused Hungary of violating Ukraine's airspace. Now, Hungary has hit back saying Ukraine is not at war with Hungary, it's at war with Russia. It should be concerned with the drones on its eastern border. He believes, and this was believes that his ministers, maybe, let's say they might have flown a few meters there. So what? Ukraine is not an independent country. Ukraine is not a sovereign country. Ukraine is financed by us. West gives its funds and weapons. And that reconnaissance drones were checking the industrial zone. Because Ukraine isn't telling even its European allies the state of Ukraine. And again, Ukraine wants to bring about a joint air defense shield against threats from Russia. Why? They create the problem so they can fleece you of money to fix the problem. There would be no problem with Russia if it wasn't for Hillary Clinton, and Joe Biden, and Barack Obama, and all the other warmongers like Merkel and Macron and Hollande and the serial liar Keir Starmer. Again, they want you to pay for anti-drone security and all these other things. And they keep telling you and keep showing you photographs that are so often without context. For all you know, that was a car accident. But they will never tell you the truth. There is no morality in government, only the worship of power. And of course, we always hear about the left talking truth to power. They wouldn't know the truth if it slapped them on the back of their head and then stood in front of them and laughed. Because they are nothing but clowns engaged in political warfare. Because they are deep down cowards who cannot face their own troubles alone. They always have to make their problems your problems. Now, of course, Russia equally engages in political warfare, but at least we can be pretty much sure that Russia isn't deliberately killing women and children in Ukraine. That Ukraine is constantly engaged in propaganda. Because Ukraine is never, ever, again, they claim to have reclaimed Dobrynia. Again, they were never occupied. The Russians have not occupied Dobrynia. Yes, they have held back the Russians. And they say the Russians lost nearly 3,200 soldiers in this operation. Again, no proof. They are constantly lying to you. However, according to the Ukrainian blog, they say the Ukrainian forces were actually surrendered the village. Now, we'll get to the map shortly. But the Russians captured this village yesterday. Ukraine never recaptured territory. The Ukrainians constantly claim to have shot down more drones and missiles than Russia launched, according to the Russian Ministry of Defense. And again, Germany is rattling the cages, trying to provoke a war. Trying to fleece you of money for their drone defense system and their so that Captain Sky Shield Zelensky could sit there and collect a paycheck of $384,000. Or whatever they're going to offer him, because I don't think Europe's going to pay him $384,000. He said he'll step down, yeah, but he's offering to become Captain Sky Shield and run this so-called air defense operation against Russian aggression. You mentioned the Middle East right now, the Middle East all gathered to... Who's more likely to be the victim of aggression? Is Russia more likely to invade? How many times has Russia invaded Europe? Compare that to how many times America has invaded the Middle East or reacted a coup around the world. Who's the aggressor? And of course, most of the time, it's the liberal democracies. Now, I'm not saying that they're not provoked. There is definitely a case for most wars, but not all wars. And again, a lot of them were not well planned, well fought, or well equipped, and on the diplomatic front are often buffoons who couldn't negotiate a sandwich at a sandwich shop. And of course, they keep talking about the Russian economy and never about the British or the French or the Germans. So the Russian foreign minister has vowed a decisive response if attacked, repeating the fact that Russia has no intention to attack the West. But again, always falls on deaf ears. Now to the war map. As usual, the Ukrainians claim to have shot down drones, but power was cut in the north of in the region north of Kiev. We'll go to Sumy. There is fighting in the buffer zone as usual without any advance, although there could have been a little bit here, but that's debatable. But there is fighting in the buffer zone north of Kupiansk, and there's fighting in Kupiansk, renewed fighting over the centre of the town. Now we go to north of the Loman area. We have fighting in the town where Ukraine reported that Russia had taken the town. Russian Ministry of Defense. Well, of course, that does not look like 66 square miles, does it? But no, Sakharine may have fallen, maybe. Again, this is a Ukrainian map reporting. But there is fighting in the area still. So maybe the Ukrainians are fighting it's a fighting retreat. I don't know. The Russians again fighting on the road to Klominsk, fighting around Klominsk without any advance. And again, this is Dobrodnipro, where they claim to have liberated, but the Ukrainians claim to have liberated Dobrodnipro and the surrounding area, which is only 25 square kilometres. That's not 66 square miles. And square miles are much bigger than that. And the Russians hadn't even crossed this line yesterday. So there's fighting in the area. Now there's fighting around and south. And there was definitely fighting in Pavlovsk. Pokvost. Man, I'm not very good with the pronunciations, am I? Sorry. All right. But let's see. No town named Pokvost up here. Pokvost has not been taken. This area here was not taken by Russia. So Ukraine liberated it. Fucking hell. But then they announced that they evacuated a village. They haven't surrendered the village south. Russia's overran that weeks ago. Although there's still reporting fighting in the fields and area around it. I mean, Ukraine and Russia do exchange artillery fire, and Russia has made advances here in the west, but that's about it. Not much excitement, not much good news for whether you're Russian or Ukrainian. There's no good news, never any good news. Always claims by Ukraine to have shut down most drones. I'm not saying that they haven't, but again, the claim is always they do it. Now, of course, as we go around the news, EU is winning. That's why we need to steal that's why they need to steal Russian assets. But of course, the plan to do so has fallen into another major problem. Belgium, where most of Russia's assets are frozen, has repeatedly opposed the move, fearing that it will weaken investor confidence in the Eurozone. Fact, China, India, and many other countries, Brazil, have all threatened to withdraw financing and investment in Europe and the European Bank if they steal 1 cent from Russia. They may gain a few million or a few billion from stealing from Russia. They'll lose trillions in trade. Now, Ukraine allegedly put out, I have not seen the Ukrainian ministry's announcements, most of course because they're on the Kiev site and mostly in Ukrainian and mostly crap. But for once, Sweden has called out the crap. That Sweden is not providing Ukraine with fighter jets, as as Ukraine claims, and has no intention and no new information. They did say that they were going to provide some support. Now, this included American F-16s and French Mirages, but according to the Ukrainians, no, they want their Gripens. Now, Ukraine showed off recently some aircraft they acquired. This was 2 Eurofighters, some F-16s, and I think 2 Mirages. They've never been seen since. A lot of people in Kiev says the only time they see the jets on flyovers on weekends, and that's about it. Folks, they are using those fighters to hunt down drones, but they're going nowhere near the combat zone. There's no air-to-air. Because if they get within 100 kilometers of the combat zone, they're within range of Russian missile air defenses. The Polish Prime Minister has said this conflict is the biggest threat to our security. Important for EU leaders. They keep saying what a big threat Russia is. So a country with the economy of the size of Italy is a big threat to Europe. No. Ukraine is the threat. He doesn't even get it. It's not our war, but Europe keeps wanting to drag us into their war. Poland wants to go to war. This is fundamentally against Western civilization. We had hope that Tusk was going to do something, but no. Like every other weak person, they give in to the EU over national interests because they don't want to get removed from office by a fascist superstate, because America won't stand up to Europe and say, get rid of this abomination. Right or wrong, at least Truman stood up to the British and said, get rid of this empire. Right or wrong? Okay. At least he made it known. At least the EU is nothing but an empire. But however, there is still some promise in Ukraine, seeking to ban the Ukrainian groups who glorify the massacre of Polish citizens in World War II. whether they be Nazi, communist, or fascist, or you remember the Ukrainian Insurgent Army and the Banderas group run Ukraine, and Nazi sympathizers. Now, it wasn't just against Jewish, but it was predominantly Jews in Ukraine. But they miss out on the fact that they killed 1 million Ukrainian Christians as well. But that's the problem, isn't it? They always leave that out. Now, Zelensky, of course, has been accused multiple times of provocation and false flags, with provocations of flying UAVs into Poland and Romania and claiming they're Russian. Russian intelligence says that they plan to continue this to resort to any means necessary to ignite a big war. And it's a lack of public outcry that really fuels this problem. Now, they're also accusing the UK of helping sink Russian tankers outside of Russian territory in order to provoke natural disasters, which will be basically bring back the boogeyman spectre and limitations on tankers, basically they try to turn everything into a low trust society where fuel tankers have to be guarded and putting more and more ships at risk at sea, which will further add to the costs of world trade. But of course, this is all to plan. All to plan. Klaus Schwab at the Arab conference was laughing about October 7th, and they were all chanting and cheering. There is no morality, folks. Get the message out there. Please like, share, and subscribe. Please support the channel today. I need your support more than ever in this age of censorship. We must begin to fight the digital revolution, to fight digital oppression. Support me on Patreon. Buy my books, buy my merch. All my links are in the link tree, description below, or in my profile. Thank you to each and every one of you. I really appreciate you all. We are all in danger. Not from Russia, not from China, but our own governments and their weakness and their cowardice and their kowtowing to the interests of Africa, India, China, and the Middle East. Stop defending democracy and start defending your country and your civilizations. Thank you for listening. See you in the next video. Bye for now.